Day 8, Niagara Falls. I woke up to a beautiful sunrise overlooking the shores of Lake Ontario. After last night's near panic to find a place to host my stay in Toronto, I woke to a lovely surprise. Waking to a warm and beautiful sun was welcoming considering the poor weather of last night. My temporary home in Toronto would be Etobicoke, right along the shore overlooking Lake Ontario. I decided to explore the area and found a park close by. I established that visiting this park would be my main routine every morning while I remained in Toronto. Pretty murals lined some of the buildings in this park. I would soon discover in the days ahead that Toronto has marvelously talented graffiti artists. Today I would also visit one of Canada's best-known landmarks, Niagara Falls. I took Queen Elizabeth Way south through Oakville and then east through St. Catharines until I arrived at Niagara Falls. I arrived much earlier than the bustling tour groups and horde of tourists that I would encounter shortly. I found public parking close to the main walkway, only to find that it charged $5 an hour. I have never seen or experienced such abhorrent parking fees. I parked at a lot a few kilometers further down for a fraction of the price, and walked in the torrid heat of the Ontario summer towards Niagara Falls. I passed by the Niagara Falls Floral Showcase, which, unfortunately, was closed for the season, or closed due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Some of the interesting statues were present amongst the grounds. Unfortunately, they did not look like they were well maintained. A young boy riding what appeared to be a galloping turtle. Another young boy who was clutching a bird in an attempt to fly. A young girl with a fish in her hand, almost as if she were yelling out, "Look, Mama, look what I caught." And then a lovely figure of a woman holding some object with a sad look on her face. The sculptor of these statues was probably not a happy person when he or she created these. I also passed by the Niagara Parks Power Station. Naturally, harnessing the power of water to provide electricity to the surrounding area is an excellent choice. As I was nearing the main area of Niagara Falls, the sound of rushing water became almost deafening. I've been to many waterfalls in and around Vancouver, but nothing in my life came close to this. The rushing water went down over several steps prior to the main attraction, and even then it was loud. The amount of water coming over the falls on a daily basis must be massive. By the time I arrived in the main area of Niagara Falls, the crowds were starting to arrive, along with even higher temperatures. Thankfully, parts of the walkway were exposed to the mist wisping off the falls and covering tourists with a natural cooling effect. While some avoided the mist as if it were toxic, I embraced the cooling effect as if it were a gift from nature itself. I had removed my shirt long ago, as I normally do during high temperatures. I allowed the mist to engulf my body, and when saturated to my satisfaction, I continued onward on the walkway. The main area of Niagara Falls was quite busy now, and all the parking spaces were filled and tourists packed all the areas where pictures can be taken. People of all nationalities and backgrounds were here. One of the lovely things I would learn about the Greater Toronto Area is how culturally diverse it is. While Vancouver is also diverse, Toronto beats it hands down. As I would also come to learn about Toronto in the coming days, how ethnically diverse it was with so many languages spoken and different people with backgrounds from all parts of the world coming together. There were tour boats available for those who wanted to see Niagara Falls from the water. I decided to pass on this as it was far too touristy for me. While it would have been the spectacle to see these magnificent falls up close, I thought of something that would be much more adventurous than entertaining. There was a zipline parallel to Niagara Falls, which I knew I must do. I purchased a ticket, was weighed in, and given fall gear. From then I proceeded up the steps to the platform, joining a long line of people of all ages, ticking off something from this bucket list. Even young children were lined up with excitement, while I grew somewhat nervous about what was in store ahead. I have ziplined before in Whistler, which was the longest zipline in North America. So this should have been nothing but an adrenaline rush for me. When I reached the platform, I was seated in the harness by an attendant and given instructions. Then the gate opened up and I was hanging in midair. When the attendants finally released us, I shouted a few profanities in one of my native languages. I kept my eyes open, looking at the people on the walkway waving at me. While the zip line was actually much slower than what I expected it to be, it was as exciting and as fun as I wanted. So much so that I decided to take another turn at it. The attendant at the bottom of the platform mentioned that I could go again for only $10. So I did. After my second run at the zip line, I entered the Journey Behind the Falls experience. It was an experience where I was given a waterproof poncho and a quick elevator ride to the bottom of the cliff, right beside the falls. Niagara Falls screams tourism at every corner. And while I skipped the boat experience, I thought that this would be almost as interesting. At the bottom of the elevator, I had the option of purchasing a photo package where my picture would be superimposed onto a background of Niagara Falls. While this was another attraction to make a large sum of money from tourists, I actually opted for this package. The two pretty girls who were taking my picture told me to pose, and so I asked them if I could do it without my shirt on. They laughed and said sure, as if I wasn't going to do it. Given my rigid diet and exercise regimen that I've been following for over a year, combined with my blatant disregard for other people's opinions, I took my shirt off and posed. The two pretty girls giggled in surprise and took my picture. I then traveled down the walkway where I could hear the roaring thunder of the falls ahead of me, as well as the echo of people in the tunnel. At the end of the tunnel, a clearing opened up to a platform where it was nearly impossible for anyone to have a conversation, and definitely impossible for anyone to remain dry. I cared not for staying dry, as I was still feeling the burn of the near 40-degree weather. While others struggled with their ponchos to remain dry, I was one of the few who refused to wear a poncho, and certainly only one that was shirtless, enjoying the cooling effect. Walking back through the tunnel and towards the elevator were some pictures over on the walls depicting the history of Niagara. The numerous attempts, some fatal, of those to cross over the falls, as well as statistics regarding volume and other measurements. After enjoying myself in Niagara Falls, I decided to drive to explore the area. I walked back to my vehicle, with it being well past lunch and in the early afternoon, so I was getting quite hungry. Not wanting to eat at overpriced eateries in Niagara Falls, I drove through the Niagara Parkway down to Lakeshore Road, passing by many mansions of opulent wealth. I reached Fort Erie and looked for something to satisfy my hunger, but found nothing, so I continued onward. I drove through to Crystal Beach, only to be advised that it was full and no parking was available. Not being too disappointed, I drove further up to Port Colborne and then up to Welland. By this time, I was so hungry I couldn't help myself. I just ended up stopping at a Tim Hortons to satisfy my hunger with processed food. While sitting in the Tim Hortons, I searched for other attractions nearby. I ordered additional food to go and decided to visit a mountain lookout in Hamilton, which was on the way back to Etobicoke. Just a short 1-hour drive, which I would learn was short for Toronto standards, was a mountain bluff overlooking the city centre of Hamilton. What I quickly learned about driving in Toronto was that everyone was in a race, and that the highways are street legal racetracks. While I naturally drive quicker than most posted speed limits, I was easily passed by diesel 1-ton trucks hauling boats on the highway. I felt like everyone with an Ontario license plate was in a mad rush to get to somewhere quick. I arrived in Hamilton to enjoy my supper while overlooking the city from a rocky outcrop. Most of the views were blocked by vegetation, and the vegetation contained poison ivy, so I dared not venture past the guardrails. The sun was starting to set, and after a wonderful first day in Toronto, I decided it was time to return to Etobicoke. Well, the drive from Etobicoke to Niagara Falls and the drive from Welland to Hamilton taught me that everyone here drives like Jacques Villeneuve. I also learned that Toronto traffic was horrendous. What would have been a quick 45-minute drive from Hamilton back to Etobicoke turned into a near 3-hour stop-and-go ordeal. Somewhere around the 2-hour mark, while I was stuck in traffic, I felt my bladder complain. In the middle of the highway, I had no choice but to press onwards to my destination. The thought of simply pulling over, hopping onto the side of the fence while others watched me relieve myself, did cross my mind. I was left undecided on what to do. Certainly these other drivers would understand the predicament that I was in. When a bladder complains, one must listen. Eventually, I arrived in Etobicoke after nearly 3 hours of late-night traffic and relieved myself in a much more civilized sense. With my bladder now empty, along with my patience. I closed my eyes, reflecting on the memories that I have created. Subscribe to the Travel Experience channel. Tap the bell and join the conversation in the comments section below.